Okay.
You're good to go. Thank you, Melanie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm uncertain how to move the slides forward, though. I apologize. Okay. So I run the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Food Recovery Program. This is something that I love doing. Florida is the only state that has a food recovery program at the state government level, and that makes us unique. And in developing this program, I have focused specifically on working with farms and schools. And one of the ways that I specifically work with farms is through field gleaning. Some of you may be familiar already with the term gleaning. Some of you may not. But basically it is the act of collecting surplus produce that is left in farmers' fields. And this is generally because there's a price drop in the commodity, so it's no longer profitable to harvest, or because of aesthetics. For example, the product might be too large or too small to send, but it is all still a wholesome, nutritious, edible commodity. One of the reasons that we engage in food recovery is to combat food insecurity, and I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir about food insecurity, and I'm sure many of you know that we have millions of Floridians who could use additional nutritious food in their diets. Next slide, please. Is there someone who moved the slide the first time? Because I wasn't sure if I was the one who did it. Well, that's okay. We'll just keep moving forward because I'm not sure how the slides work. In working with the farmers, I partner with gleaning agencies. The largest one is Society of St. Andrew, but there are, in fact, numerous gleaning agencies, and we work with trained volunteers to go out to farmers' fields and collect the produce. We then partner with food distribution agencies. Sometimes it's a large major food bank like Feeding South Florida. Sometimes it's a smaller pantry. It all depends on the volume of produce that we're recovering. And that is really up to the farmer, but there's no minimum or maximum. And I know that most of you are probably more focused on the school side of things. And we have a wonderful new website that we have put together that has many resources, and I'm happy to share that with you, where we promote share tables, which some of you I hopefully are familiar with, where a student can leave an item on the share table after leaving the lunch line if it's something they're not going to eat, and another student can pick it up. This program is promoted by the USDA and the Florida Department of Agriculture, and we also run the National School Lunch Program. So we do try to talk to schools about that because we already have that connection. I think some people think they're not allowed to, but they absolutely can. The only caveat is that we ask that you contact your county health department first, and that's something I assist schools with often, trying to connect them with the correct person in the health department. And the USDA even states that schools can recover those share table items and bring them back behind the house and serve them as part of a second reimbursable meal, which means basically you get 2 reimbursements for the same item if you recover it. That's something that schools aren't often aware of. And we also promote student food waste audits. And this is a great way to engage students and teach them about how to organize food. For example, let's say you pour all your milk in one bucket, you put all of your dry goods, crackers, things like that in one. So basically you just organize all the food and then you weigh it. and you can find out which food items are most often wasted, and then you can take measures to try and reduce that waste, whether it's implementing offer versus serve, or trying to find ways to encourage students to eat more fruits and vegetables. In the case of young children, this might be cutting it up into smaller pieces or presenting it in a different way. So when share tables and food waste audits, which is also a form of source reduction, are exhausted, you can donate USDA food, school food, to nonprofit food distribution agencies. And on the website, I have checklists and information on how schools can do that, including a sample agreement that a school can sign with a nonprofit food distribution agency. We also have created some flyers on composting, because that, of course, keeps food out of the landfill. And I see that we have our amazing EPA food recovery hierarchy up there. So you'll see source reduction, that's our food waste audits, feeding hungry people, that's your share tables and your food donations, and then of course composting. So that's just like sort of a quick rundown of the types of resources that I'm promoting. More than anything, I'm here to provide legal information, connect people who have similar goals and ideas, but I do have to say that I could never do what I do without the support of IFAS. All of you guys, I've met some of you in person, and every success I've had is usually involved someone from IFAS, whether it be an ag extension agent on the farm side or someone with a family nutrition program on the school side, and then people within the community, because what I really do is I try to help build grassroots programs. I try and work myself out of a job. I want the community to be able to engage in food recovery methods without any assistance from the government, and I just try to guide people in how to do that. So I did kind of get away from the slides a little bit. I apologize about that, but I encourage all of you to look it over. Most of the things I think I touched on, and I encourage all of you to contact me via phone or email if you have any questions at all. So is there anything that you would like me to delve more deeply into or speak more about at this time?
Melanie, I'm sorry about that. For some reason on my end, the slides jumped when I went to move it originally. So there is a question in the chat. It says, this is from Tara in Manatee County. She says, our FNS director told us they don't do share tables right now because they don't have the staff to manage the share tables. And I don't know if you had mentioned, but I think the question is, did you mention that Department of Health is in charge of share tables?
Yes, so this is a great double question. DOH does monitor the share tables. There are statewide regulations, but each county can do something different. They don't have to use the state regulations, but I would say 99% of the counties do. And I would need to double check this, but I believe that St. Lucie is the only county that does something different. And I can send each of you the memo that has all of the rules, but they are pretty easy. Basically, cold items need to be kept at 45 degrees. Like, for example, if you're having milk, they need to go into a container that has drainage. So one of the coolest ones I've seen is a school use an old salad bar and fill it with ice, and then they allow children to put the items that need to be kept cold in there. Or, of course, a donated refrigerator works great. If you're not using a refrigerator, you have to take the temperature at regular intervals. I have included a temperature log in the share table checklist on our website. So that's really the most important thing. But the Department of Health can't ask for those records, the temperature log records. And so they're the ones who would come in. And so it's really important to connect with the right person. And that's something that I think can be a hurdle for schools. So I, from many counties, have called the Department of Health for their county and figured out who it is that we need to connect with to get questions answered about how the share table will be looked at by the Department of Health. As far as the staffing, so like I said, I can't do any of the things I do without community support. So when you go into a school, you really need to find someone who will be your share table champion. It doesn't have to be monitored by a teacher or a cafeteria staff. When the younger people eat, a lot of times older students can monitor the table, and they can even sometimes get school credit or volunteer hours. I know that I believe it's Indiana, they've started this cafeteria ambassador program, and all the kids get volunteer hours, and they help the smaller children in monitoring the share table. It can be a parent from the PTA, it can be a volunteer, it can be a teacher. It's actually rarely cafeteria staff that monitor the share table because they are so busy. But there are many other people who can monitor. There's no rules or regulations about who monitors the table. It just needs to be someone who is able to take the temperature of things and make sure everything's going smoothly. So maybe not a small child would be my recommendation there. Are there any other questions, or do you have any additional questions about DOH or share table monitoring?
Melanie, I have the slide up about composting. Did you want to talk a little bit about the composting program in schools?
Sure. So this, I started getting a lot of questions about people wanting to know whether or not they could compost in schools and what they could do with that compost. So with the help of Tiffany Torres, who is IFAS here in Leon County, we found that legally and statutorily, by Florida statute states, that a school can technically make compost, put the compost on a school garden, and then serve that produce in the cafeteria. Now, I've heard of many schools serving or doing tastings with produce from the school garden, but I've yet to find one that uses school-made compost on the produce because there is a lot of red tape in order to do that. So I've never heard of a Florida school doing that, and what I generally recommend, as does the USDA, that when schools are making compost, they actually use it on their ornamentals, like your azalea tree, your azalea bushes, or your crepe myrtle trees, or whatever you have beautifying the school campus, as opposed to the garden, just because there is so much red tape. You have to take the temperature of the compost regularly and keep a lot of records. But that being said, you technically can absolutely do that, but just to keep things, for the sake of food safety and reducing bureaucracy, I recommend using it on ornamentals. And there are places where you can buy bins if you don't want a full pile. I have a composting checklist on our website that lays out all the things you need to know if you're a school trying to compost. And one thing we have is a school garden certification program that we've just put up through the Department of Agriculture, and they also go into more information about composting and how it can be done. But it's pretty simple. They just recommend you have a slab, some sort of hard surface that you put the bin or the pile on, and then you can put your compost from the food waste from the cafeteria, yard waste from the front or back of the school. So there's not a ton of regulations there. And in fact, I met with Kelly Wilson. We finally met in person the other day, and she was asking if I would do a flyer on worm composting. So that's something that I am going to start working on as well, because I'm sure that there's actually very few regulations about that. And ultimately, that's the conclusion I've come to in working in food recovery, is that there aren't that many rules and regulations. Of course, we always want to be safe and do our best, especially working with children, But I know a lot of people think they can't engage in a lot of these activities, but in fact, if we just take a few safety precautions, we can in fact do them. And this is the flyer on Gleaning. I know maybe most of you work more with schools, but I did think it was important to mention the work I do with farmers. And we did over 200,000 pounds of produce we recovered from Florida farms this past fiscal year, which for the state runs July 1st through June 30th. So that was amazing. I'm so proud of our Florida farmers, and I'm actually trying to continually expand that program. So if you know of any farmers who want to tax break or want to learn more about the many, many, many laws that protect food donors, I'm happy to share that as well. Yeah, here they are. I know this is a wordy slide, but I just always want to show people the amount of laws there are that protect food donors. It is a myth that people get in trouble for donating food. No one in the history of the United States has ever been penalized for donating wholesome food. It's never happened. But yet you go and talk to people and they say, oh no, I can't do that. I'm worried about, you know, reprisal or getting in trouble. There are national laws, there are state laws. There's even a specific state law for farmers who allow gleaners on the property. So like, for example, if a gleaner comes into the farm and they get eaten by an alligator, well, it's not the farmer's problem. So, and all food donors are eligible for a tax deduction. That was something that came out in 2016 federal Congress. This is a federal tax deduction, and they increased the donation. I have a flyer that gives examples of how this works. When farmers ask me specific questions, I always direct them to their financial professional because I can only give like surface information. I'm not an accountant by any means. But I do have a great flyer on our website that gives some examples and lays out the tax deduction a little bit more clearly. Yeah, so we got our Florida Farm to School Conference coming up. I will be speaking, as will Elaine Fiore, who is with Broward County Schools, and Barbara of the Society of St. Andrew, our largest gleaning organization. And I'm sure we're going to have many other interesting things happening at that conference. Please visit our website. It's full of free resources that you can make copies of and pass out and do whatever you want with. I will send Kelly Wilson the link if she's okay with that, and then she can forward it on to anyone who is interested at all. Yes, Kelly says yes, so I will do that as soon as we're done here. And I will include my contact information, and as you can see, I'm a talker, so you can always contact me and I will talk to you about your specific food recovery needs. And yeah, so thank you so much. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, I'm so sorry. We did change our email addresses, although if you send me an email to this, I will get it. I'll send Kelly the updated one, but it's just melanie.mason@fdacs.gov. But I'll send that out, and I apologize for that.
Okay, if we don't have any questions, Melanie, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us about this really valuable resource that FDAC is supporting and providing to the communities. And I look forward to this getting implemented in more counties. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope all of you have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Have a good weekend.
All right. Bye.